Okay.
I'll let you know. Mr. Chairman, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, thank you. Committee will call the meeting to order. And the first order of the business will be roll call, and we'll hold it open in case we're missing one member. If he had as much trouble logging on as I did, then he's probably trying to do that right now. Go ahead, Clarissa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Blackburn.
Here.
Representative Clausen.
Here.
Representative Fortner.
Here.
Representative Heiner.
Here.
Representative Larson.
Here.
Representative Western.
Excuse.
Representative Worf.
Here.
Representative Winter.
Here.
Chairman Eklund.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. So the first order of business will be a little bit of discussion on these bills. They're not exactly in the shape we want them to be. And I think I'm hoping that I got emails off to everybody on the amendment for 51. And I don't know if Aaron got his off too. I'm going to let him explain what we hope to do this morning. And did you want to explain both bills or just 54?
So, Mr. Chairman, if you would.
Okay.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, my plan would be to go ahead and explain an overview of the issue and why we came up with these two bills, what these two bills do, and kind of what the direction going forward is, if that's all right with you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
All right, Mr. Chairman. So in the interim, if you'll remember back to this spring when the shutdowns were going on a large scale, there was no meat in the grocery stores, or very little meat in the grocery stores. They were euthanizing hogs back east, and you could buy them for less than $100, or they would give them to you. We realized, I guess we've kind of had a hunch, but we realized how weak our food system is in certain places, and one of those would be in the meat processing and distribution places. So we looked into it over the interim, and we realized how really, really weak our distribution system was. So we basically don't have an avenue. If we had fat cattle, or even cattle standing around ready to go, and people that needed to eat them and were hungry in Wyoming, we don't have an avenue that we could get them to them in any scale. So to give you a kind of just a quick glance at what we're looking at, year before last, and I think we increased it a little bit last year, but year before last, we only had capacity for state and federally funded, or not capacity, but we only killed 1,200 head state and federally inspected in the state of Wyoming. And I think we improved it by about 35% the last year to up to 1,600. To give you some sort of idea of the scale of this problem, the plant to the south of us, very large, 40 miles from where we're sitting in Cheyenne, does 6,000 a day. So we realized we had a pretty big problem in looking into it. Part of it is the barriers to entry for USDA are pretty steep, but they're food safety issues, and whether we like it or not, they're probably going to stay there. So we need to work around those parameters. So we came up with two concepts, and these are the kind of the culmination of that work. One of these bills, the first one we'll work on, basically just directs the business council to help meat processors help out with technical assistance, permitting, loans, things they do anyway. So that's what the business council is set up to do. We're going to run an amendment on it that basically is, so it's not so descriptive. So we can basically tell them, hey, we want you to help out with this, but it's not going to be exactly how they do it. The way the bill's drafted, it tells them exactly how they need to do it, and it's probably going to be a little bit burdensome administratively, and it's probably not necessary to be that descriptive. You want me to go on to the next bill, or do you want to work that bill first, or do you want me to? So I'll do while I'm doing an overview, I'll tell you kind of give you a gist of what the other bill does. So the other bill, which is 54, will use some CARES Act money, and this bill was directed at using CARES Act money actually last year. We didn't get the bill out, of course, because we didn't have a special session. But so the Department of Ag created a program without the bill, and what this particular bill does is just extends the program into the next year. So it was a real short time frame, I believe October to December, for processors to take advantage of the CARES Act money. What this bill will do after we amend it up is extend it so they can use these funds onto the next year. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll see if anybody has any questions over the general overview of the issue, and then we'll go into work on the first bill if you don't care.
Well, it won't let me unmute there. Now you can hear me, I suppose. A couple of things that I might say ahead of time. After you get it sorted out, it isn't quite as complex as it seemed when we first started this. So we've got 3 things going that we're working on concerning the CARES funding. We had legislation a couple years ago, I believe, to get meat processing plants going. I don't think it was this year, but I think it was 2 years ago. Get meat processing plants going in the state of Wyoming. So the Department of Ag was trying to streamline their process to get that done, and it was done through them. The next bill that we'll discuss will be handled by the Business Council, and it would be another avenue for people to apply for funding, mostly loans, I believe, but there may be some grant money. We'll kind of see how the budget shakes down. Then the third avenue, that's House Bill 54. The third avenue would be our House Bill 51, which is the meat processing program that uses CARES Act stimulus funds. So the Ag Committee during the interim honed out a bill that needed some date changes, and we found some other things that needed to be changed as well. So with that, so there are actually 3 avenues to get this done. 2 of them are Department of Ag. Yes, 2 of them would be Department of Ag. One, the existing program, the other one using federal dollars. And we do have some money left over that we can use towards that. There may be another funding package that comes, but we want to be ready to do that if we can. And so I'll turn the discussion on House Bill 54 to the Vice Chair, Representative Clausen, and he can explain what we've done to try to trim this down and explain what it does, because we decided in the process they may have the ability to do it. This bill amounts to more of a directive that we want an emphasis on meat plants. I think Representative Clausen explained the problem pretty well. The tens of thousands of hogs that were destroyed during the pandemic were the result of one plant in eastern South Dakota closing down. That amounted to 1/3 of the processing capability. It was cheaper to kill the pigs than to hang on to them until they could get the plant up and running. I think that was a directive coming from Washington, D.C. to get the plant going again. Years ago in the 30s, I'm giving a little history. I can't believe I've had to live through the same thing my grandparents did in the 30s. And they had an opportunity to sell pork to the US government. And it was 3 cents a pound higher selling to the US government than on the open market. But the hogs would go into a trench, be shot and buried, and they refused to do it. So we as a state can relieve a little bit of this pressure. These plants have become huge. We do have some here in the US, but the bulk, I think, are in Brazil. I've heard Venezuela has them too. I don't really want our food controlled by foreigners. So anyway, this is a small part we can do. Representative Worth, you got a question? Go ahead.
I did, Mr. Chairman. Am I remember, did we table one of these bills? It seemed like we tabled the bill, and I can't remember which bill we tabled, but was it one of these bills?
54,
Yeah,
I believe. Or no,
yeah. We actually tabled them
51.
both.
Did we table
Yeah.
them? Oh, we have to just
Yeah.
pull them off the table.
Yeah, we tabled 54 a couple weeks ago, whenever we met first,
Thanks for the
because we weren't. Yeah, and then the other one, we didn't finish working.
Thank
We
you.
didn't finish, yeah, okay. Representative Clausen, go ahead.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, the first thing we need to do is move to take this House Bill 54 off the table.
Oh, okay,
So moved.
been moved,
Been moved.
and do we have a second? Okay, we got a second too. Did you get that, Clarissa?
I did, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead. Been moved and seconded to
Do we need
to
to?
untable it.
Okay,
We-
we don't
We'll
need
go through
to.
the discussion of the bill and what we're trimming down on it, and then we'll bring in the public to discuss it as well.
Okay, I think, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, I'll go through the basically what the bill does now, and then I'll go back through and kind of give an explanation of what we want to take out of it to make it a little lighter, a little easier to work with. Okay, so starting on page 2, so a little genesis. This is a bill that's already in existence that we worked about, or we did 3 years ago, and this is just updates to it. But this adds that the Business Council will meet on this issue not more than 2 times, or not fewer than 2 times a year, and then they'll bring in the Department of Agriculture and the Governor's Office and industry stakeholders to the extent practical, which doesn't tell anybody that they have to be there, but says we'd like them to discuss this issue twice a year. The second part says we would develop a strategy, and it just changes beef to meat so we can include other proteins in there. And we're going to have an amendment that goes from developed to maintain, so because we already have this strategy in place. Let's see. On page 3, the line 1 says contingent on available funds. So what this means in real life is the Business Council already has programs that do a lot of these things, loans, helping people out with technical assistance. So this is, there won't be, they won't use funds unless they're there for this. There's not specific funds appropriated for this program. It's through their current funding structure and programs. Let's see. So at the bottom of page 3, line 17, it says not to exceed $1 million per project. When we get going into this, I'd like to amend that to $6 million because it's going to use current Business Council programs, and their limits are $6 million instead of $1 million. So this may stifle a few things. Just makes it the same as what Business Council programs would normally do. So,
Mr. Vice Chairman, I might add in that part that most of the funding would be in the form of loans, fairly low interest loans. The 3% loan is actually a good deal for the state of Wyoming and for the people borrowing the money. More than likely, if you're building what we would think would be a large plant, which in any scale of the thing is still a small one, the if there is $1 million grant funding, the people will more than likely have to come up with some kind of private funding of their own. Go ahead, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, moving on to page 4. So this is where we're a little too tight, where we're going to change it to be less descriptive, but I'll explain what it does now. So right now it would provide technical assistance for processors seeking federal grants and loans, increasing, provide loans, grants, technical assistance, or expertise. And these are all things that the Business Council does right now. The way we have this, it would be pretty descriptive, and it would, I think we can get away with broadening this up to just say that they'll help with meat processing issues. But anyway, I'll go through the bill. Right now it says provide technical assistance and expertise for permitting, provide technical and assistance that's for processors that are seeking federal grants, provide technical assistance and expertise for regulatory requirements, provide technical assistance and expertise to assist with producers with acquiring light, water, communications, security, and services for facilities, investigate, plan, and establish priorities for meat processing facilities in Wyoming, engage with international and domestic stakeholders on potential market opportunities. So this portion would be marketing, develop and administer programs to educate producers and the public on meat processing and the Wyoming livestock industry, including tours, academic programs, communication plans. Bottom of page 5, it says any meat processing facility receiving this assistance under this section shall comply with all applicable state, federal, or regulations. We'll leave this part. Moving on to page 6, line 2, the council shall submit a comprehensive report of the programs and activities to the Joint Agriculture, State and Public Lands, Water Resources Interim Committee, and we're going to leave this part. So, Mr. Chairman, if it's okay with you, I'd like to go back through and kind of highlight what I would like to cut out in an amendment.
Go ahead.
If there's no questions at this point, do you want to take questions, or do you want me to say where we're going with the bill first?
I don't see any questions. Go ahead. We'll, if somebody raises a hand, we'll interrupt and take the question.
All right, what I'd like to do, or what I think we can do to maybe not make this so descriptive, we can just broaden the topic and give the Business Council a little more room. Starting on page 4, lines 9 through 23, or line 9. We'll strike after line 9, strike that whole page. And then we'll go back up on page 4, line 3. And we will insert after processors with constructing, maintaining, marketing, or expanding, or let's see, constructing, maintaining, expanding, and marketing for meat processing plants. So basically, we, instead of telling them exactly what they're going to do all year, we're just going to tell them that we want them to work on this issue within these parameters, and they have programs in place that they can already do most of these things. Let's see. The other change I would like to make, page 3, line 18. So right now that says $1 million, and currently under rules, the Business Council can do $6 million. So I'd like to change on page 3, line 18, the 1 million to 6 million, and that's what I'm proposing. The basics of it are just not to be descriptive to tell the Business Council what to do, but just to ask them to work on these issues in the parameters that they already have programs. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions.
Questions Committee. Representative Wharf, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess I've got a lot of questions. I guess I really don't like, if you haven't figured it out yet, I really don't like us abrogating our authority to all these other departments or all these other entities. And I know it's already, I mean, I think we're better off to have a bill that is descriptive. That's our job, is to tell the the people what we want this bill to do. And, so I guess that's my first question, because if we, right now, the current bill has the descriptive stuff in it. It also tells them that they can promulgate rules to do what they need to do. And I just think you got to, if you're going to give them the ability to promulgate rules, you got to give them the instruction. If we're not going to do the instruction, then I think we shouldn't give them the ability to promulgate rules, because they may come up with rules that are outside what we would like. And I guess the other question I have, I've heard it said, a lot of the public have said to me, and I'm sure you probably heard the same thing. When a certain administration, and I'm talking on a national level, directed monies to certain programs and they all failed, everybody criticized them and said the government has no business really telling, picking the winners and losers. And I guess that's a little bit of a problem I have with, the Business Council and NDOW. I just don't agree with the process. And I guess the question I have, Mr. Chairman, I don't know enough. You mentioned that your family had raised pigs and refused to sell them to the government. Has Wyoming had meat processing plants that have failed to thrive in our past? I just don't know the history enough to know. Has it been tried and failed, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I can answer part of that, and I'll let Representative Clausen go first. Go ahead, Aaron.
So, Mr. Chairman, the progression of so if you haven't been around this issue, it's been progression over the last probably 50 years, but more in the 20 years. So most of the processing has gotten vertically integrated into huge centralized plants. Part of the problem with the pork industry is the major players in the pork industry are actually owned by the Chinese, and with the fingers of the Chinese government in there. Same way with the beef industry. Basically 60-70% of the processing in the United States is actually owned by the Brazilians, or people out of country. So you have these huge conglomerations, massive factories, 6,000 head a day, plants that service this. The evolution of things, the smaller and mid-sized plants kind of got beat out. They aged out over time with the processes they had, with the infrastructure they had, and began to fall out. So what we were left with is small custom plants, which they're a necessity, but the goal of this is to expand those small custom plants at least enough so if we get into another wreck like we had in the spring, where those big plants were shut down, we can at very least feed our own people. But there's also a long-term marketing opportunity. There's huge demand for locally raised meats, and that's kind of the genesis of where this comes from, the background. And your other question was growing things, and yeah, that's a personal. I guess that's your personal opinions.
So in Wyoming, as far as I know, we never had to destroy any animals. We've got more cattle than we do people, and I have known with beef cattle, in the beef cattle industry, you can hold them easier than you can the pork. They can be put on a more roughage diet. Pork they don't do that in the pork industry. As far as the reliability of processing plants, right now we have some beef scheduled. Normally I'd schedule them ahead 3 to 4 months ahead of time. They're scheduled out. I did some scheduling early, which was a good thing. We raised mostly just some locker beef, and right now I've heard of plants that are scheduled out over a year and maybe even closer to 2 years. So this is how much demand there is for these plants. In my mind, I don't think you'd have the plant fail. As far from a business model, the demand for this is high enough. And I've said that for years. There've been a shortage of processing facilities to get locker beef done in the state and around. We've used 3 or 4 different processing plants. Of course, we have our favorites. One of them burned down in Torrington. That was one that we had used quite a bit. So, and they're in the process of trying to some people are building another plant, and there are other ideas. So as far as a failure of the plant, what could possibly cause failure is the inability to get help, labor, and inspectors are another problem, but I think that one can be fixed. The state can do that. State or federal government actually can do that. Depends on, there are 2 types of plants, and we're discussing it. There's a custom plant, and I think you could take, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't ever used them. You could take your elk to the custom processing plant, and they do have inspections there, but you're able to take the already butchered carcass there to be cut up and what have you. And then there is a state inspected plant, and with a state inspected meat, you have to have it marketed through Beef Shares, which is a program we can do, or title the animal over to sell it. The best way to, I think, to solve this problem of marketing locker beef is to have the USDA inspected plants. For a while, we didn't have any in Wyoming. Now we have at least 1 that I'm aware of, and maybe 2. But the USDA inspected plant would allow you to basically sell a 1-pound package of hamburger without too much consequence if it's been inspected that way. As far as the chance of failure for the processing plant, I think anybody with a lick of sense could make this work. They just would have to, the failure would be in not liking the work that they've got themselves put into, or not finding the help. So we have a couple more questions. Representative Fortner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When I was a kid in the 60s, there was a processing plant in Sheridan, Wyoming. That plant is no longer there. It hasn't been for 30 years. And my question is, we have investment in these plants in the state of Wyoming, so we got places to go get our feed when we need it, our beef, pork, or whatever. What mechanisms do you have in this bill to keep these plants in Wyoming, that they can't be bought out and moved out of Wyoming? Is you guys got anything in place for that? I could see that happening. Thank you.
Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Representative Clausen, you're muted.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Taking a stab at this question. So all of these plants are free enterprises. That we can't run a law that says you have to stay in business or you have to stay in Wyoming. We can incentivize them, and just like with this bill, giving them technical expertise so they can make a better business plan, giving them marketing expertise through the state of Wyoming, so that they can market their product better. Give them expertise with licensing, so they can get the state and federal licenses so they can stay in Wyoming. But we can't pass a law that says no, you'll stay in Wyoming and you'll stay in business. But we can sure help out. We can offer them incentives, and we can do the best we can with the tools we already have in place to help keep them here. If that answers your question, Representative Fortner.
Representative Winter. well, John's trying to get.
You're
his
just muted, John.
Well, I know, but his screen went away. This happens to me too. I will turn this question over to Representative Heiner's got his hand up, so we'll have you go ahead and ask some questions, and I'll see if I can help John get back online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to voice my opinion on this. Here in the southwest part of the state, most of the meat processing plants are custom plants. And I have experienced the same situation where even before the pandemic, that you had to wait quite a while to be able to get an animal into the plant because they're so busy. So, part of the problem is marketing. If these plants want to expand and develop from a custom processing plant to one that's larger, they're going to have an increased marketing function. And I see this bill as providing some technical assistance and expertise in reaching out and developing a market. One of the big sticking points of the bill as written was the ability for someone to invest in out-of-state facilities, whereby they might be able to buy into a plant or construct a plant outside of the state boundary and employ out-of-state workers to work in the plant, utilizing Wyoming funds and Wyoming expertise. So with the amendment, that alleviates that concern that I've had that we would be actually helping our neighboring states. So I support that the amendment in that particular instance, that it does strike that outside of the state clause, so that the monies will have to remain inside the state. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Winter, go ahead when you're ready.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And I guess my question would be directed to Vice Chairman Clausen. You mentioned in your when you began here on this bill that there was $6 million in the Business Council, and we were going to make ours this bill the same as the Business Council. Could you explain that a little more for me? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
If I may.
Go ahead, Representative.
So in this portion of the bill, so in a bill, we limited this to $1 million. The Business Council already has programs that allow loans, and it's not just $6 million. I'm speaking out of turn, but there's several, I would say, well, there's a large pot of money that they already do loans out of, and the limits to their rules is $6 million. So this wouldn't create any new program, any new loan program. It would simply match up with what they already do, moving it from 1 million to 6 million. If somebody wanted to go in and get a Business Council loan, it just wouldn't limit it. It just probably wouldn't. They could probably still do it. They could probably still go through their program, even if we had this $1 million in here. This would be just an attempt to match it up with their current program. And this is actually a good thing for the state. It does, so it puts out some of our own money at 3%, and it gets projects on the ground in our own communities instead of investing in Wall Street, and we get pretty good rate of return compared to investments. But does that answer your question, Representative Winter?
I might address a little bit more. Most of these plants, the amount of money they'll get in a loan is a limited amount, so they'll have to come up with either money of their own or private funding of some sort too. I think in most of the Business Council decisions, if they're unable to get any private funding for the project, it's an indicator that it might not be a very solvent plan. So normally they wouldn't get, I think it's pretty well scrutinized, but some of the money is cheaper. Representative Wharf, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you once again. I guess another question I've thought of as I've listened to the discussion continue. I've wondered, the Business Council and NDOW already exist, and I guess the first question is, if they already exist, do we really need this? the second question is, you know, I talked about the government picking winners and losers. How do we ensure that if the state invests that, it sounds like there are some protections in place that if they put the money out, they're getting the money back. But you know, it was mentioned that we got all these big conglomerates that are owned from foreign countries. I guess I still struggle to see how we can stop them from coming in and interfering with, you know, our local business. I could see them trying to blacklist Wyoming products to where they can't be marketed. I mean, I know it's a cutthroat industry. I've talked to a lot of ranchers that have told me that the meat packers have done things on a federal level that has cost a lot of the producers about $500 a head just on some changes they made nationally. So those are just some questions that I have, Mr. Chairman, I'd like answered.
We also have a question from Representative Winter, so why don't you go ahead and ask that? And Representative Clausen and others, myself and others might be able to address some of that afterwards. Go ahead, John.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question I had also was, do we have any interest in doing this from the residents of Wyoming? Or are there people out there wanting to develop these processing plants at the present time? Thank you.
I will go ahead and start since that question's fresh in my mind. And I'm going to let you address Representative Worf's concerns, and I may add some to it. Yes, in answer to your question, Representative Winter, there are plants right now in the process of planning stage or construction stage. I'm believing one or two that I know of have already got funding from the Department of Ag for the original program, that the original money we set aside for loans and grants. But yeah, there is interest. There are people within the industry that are interested in doing it because we have no other option to get our beef processed. And I'll now turn it over to Vice Chairman Clausen.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll take a stab at that. Yeah, you're hitting the nail on the head. So conglomeration in the industry is huge, and this would just be a step to help out with these guys that they're getting beat up by basically, you know, huge economies of scale, capital from foreign countries, and it gives those major players a huge advantage. Do I see somebody blackballing Wyoming beef? No. I don't think at any scale we can get things propped up at. I don't think that we're even a threat to the majors. But how I see this going is, if you wanted to or a person wanted to get federally inspected, and say, Mr. Worf, you wanted to buy, instead of having to buy a half 7 days ahead of time, you could get a federally inspected plant, and they could have a meat counter and sell your local ranchers meat right there, and you could buy it that way. Will they be able to compete on a global scale with the giants that are conglomerates? Probably not. Will they even be a tick on the radar of those conglomerates? Probably not. With this, it's more incentivizing your hometown guy. Maybe somebody can use this program to get something a little bigger propped up, but at the end of the day, it just helps out to that smaller scale guy. The way I see it.
I'll kind of add a little to that. One of the plants that's being set up will have a custom meat counter in their store, just kind of like the old mom and pop butcher shops had. This gives us some flexibility that we kind of have, but maybe don't have. I don't know of anybody in the state of Wyoming that markets actual organic beef. That's goes through a certification process. And if you're going to market it, you probably have it marketed ahead of time, but you'd have to go through USDA inspection in most cases with that. And there are different branded beefs available, grass-fed, this and that. By having these plants set up, and large enough ones that they can handle the volume that some of the people have, you would have private individuals, maybe at the ranch level, possibly at beef co-op levels, doing the marketing. But right now, we just, for our own purposes, it's locker beef that we sell to people that know we have it. And I think most of the producers in the state are at that level. And this would open some flexibility and options for folks to go bigger than that, try to basically vertically market your cattle. You could start from calves, you could go to the feedlot, then you've got your processing packing plant, and then you can go to the marketing as well. Those are some of the ideas that have been thrown out. We have another question here. Representative Larson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Up in Powell, we had a organic beef, some guys that were trying to sell that nationwide. They ran for about 5 years and they quit just a couple of years ago. So I don't know up in my area. I don't know of anybody doing that now. I had a question. Have we moved the bill, and are we open to comments from the public at some point? I think your mic is off.
We have not moved the bill. We will after public comment. I wanted the committee to go ahead and talk first and make sure we understand what it is we're passing here. Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may have missed it, but I don't remember the question that my neighboring colleague to the west here, I don't think we got that question answered. What prevents someone going to the business council right now or the endow and receiving these funds, a loan or a grant outside of this legislation? Are they not giving out loans, or is this outside of their purview? Why do we need legislation?
Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, so they could go to the business council right now, and that's what we're going to do with this bill, is just basically tell them that we want meat processing to be a priority and we want them to work on these things. And I think they're working in this direction already. It just it gives a little legislative direction, I guess you'd say. This is something we think is a priority and we'd like you to work on. That's what we do. I mean, that's our role. We could tell them to work on an array of issues, but this is one that came to the forefront.
Like there was another question out there, but I don't see any hands. So committee, if you're done discussing this, Clarissa, how many people do we have in the waiting room?
Mr. Chairman, we have 7 people in the waiting room.
Okay, well.
We have Mr. Ron Goldberg.
Okay, let's get him in first. Ron is the CEO of the Wyoming Business Council. Come on in, Ron.
Jill
go ahead.
Tregemba is also here.
Okay, and Jill is, I'll just kind of introduce them ahead here while they're logging in. Jill is going to be managing the ag portion of the business councils. These programs would be on her plate. She comes from a ranch family in Huntley. Go ahead, Ron, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning. This has been a very good discussion to listen to this morning. I thank you all for this time. Just a quick point of clarification. I am the Strategic Partnerships Director for the Wyoming Business Council. And maybe if I could provide a little bit of background, it might help fill in the blanks from some of the questions. Representative Clausen is correct. Much of the language in here was a result of Senate File 108 in 2018. At that time, there was one USDA plant, a small one in Wyoming. Today, off the top of my head, I believe there are 5 small USDA plants. I think there's 1 or 2 that might be in the construction phase or planning. So in about 3 years, that has happened. That is primarily driven by private interests. And we had a year ago this month, we released the Wyoming beef industry study. Many of these existing USDA plant operators and prospective ones, and Jill has meetings, and our recruitment person has meetings from time to time with people looking at a plant in Wyoming. That study really is referenced. You know, I like to say that kind of metaphorically, these processors are carrying it around in their back pockets, referring to it. So we've seen this bit of growth with and these plants are pretty well regionally situated if you look at the state. So we've got that small USDA sort of regional existence. So things are happening and growing, and much credit to the private industry on that end. And I know Jill has done a lot of work. So as we look forward, we continue in that consultancy, marketing, technical assistance, working with the study. I think I mentioned Tuesday, study really emphasizes a meat industry ecosystem, if you will. Plants can be built, but how do we work with private industry and we do a lot of meetings with Department of Ag, stock growers, private industry, local representatives. What are the pains? What are the needs? What are the barriers? You know, whether it's market or what have you, or the cost of offal to a landfill. You know, when we talk about that ecosystem, what about cold storage, value-added offal? We're really, you know, on the Business Council, the State Economic Development Strategic Plan, it starts off with add value to our Wyoming's 3 core industries: energy, agriculture, tourism. So to Representative Clausen's point, and Chairman Eklund, you know, we have been doing a lot of this. We will continue, and but really look at that whole value-added chain and be driven by what industry and these partners and stakeholders are telling us, and then providing those needs. So we do not own plants. We provide this technical assistance. There are programs available for finance. We have a suite of them, and we have an economic development finance manager. You know, every project is somewhat unique. And so I think the opportunity to have access that fits for the private person to the programs we have is where we work with that. Much of on the grant side, we also try to leverage EDA grants, USDA. When Wally Walski was the state USDA representative, we met a lot with Wally, and we're always looking for these opportunities to help where we can. But yeah, I just want to make clear, we do not own any, there's no state-owned plants. Much of our grant funding is tied to publicly owned infrastructure. So say, for example, a processing plant, maybe existing one on private land, you know, a grant or a loan or a grant loan package could help with infrastructure up to the property. But say there's a new construction project on a publicly owned business park or something, for example, the facility could be built with grant or loan package, but that would be publicly owned and it would be leased and there'd be returned to the state and local entity on that. So I don't want to get too much into the weeds, the details of the programs, but wanted to address some of the questions that came up earlier and make sure you had all the information you needed, and be happy to take any questions.
Got a question from Representative Heiner. Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Goldberg, I appreciate you being here. You're a valuable asset to this conversation right now, and I appreciate that. And it sounds like you're making good progress throughout the state as we develop these processing facilities. Over the last few years, it sounds like we have really made large strides forward in our objective to create more industry for the state of Wyoming and help our ag industry. So I appreciate that. But one question I have is, do you need additional legislation to carry out what you're already doing? What will change with this legislation that we're debating right now that you aren't already doing? Because it sounds like you're already going down the path that we would like you to do. So, in your opinion, Mr. Goldberg, do we need to tell you through legislation that this is an emphasis for the state of Wyoming? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, thank you. And, I would just say, really since 2018 and really getting a focus, and I think the language that Representative Clausen proposed as an amendment today with develop a strategy to maintain, I would say we have developed and we will maintain. And I guess my question would be, how much of, how far do you want to go with the emphasis on meat processing? And that's a question for the committee that, respectfully, I don't think it's our right to answer, but we will continue to do this. We started this 3 years ago. And it's a matter of Jill's time and the resources, how much is dedicated, because Jill does work with other aspects of agriculture, certainly. So I hope that answers your question, but we are standing here. We're excited about the small wins, the challenges that consistently come up. There are many, as you're all aware, with meat processing, and we're going to continue working hard on that.
Follow up, Representative Heiner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Goldberg, has over the past few years that you've been emphasizing this processing meat packing development through the state of Wyoming, has there been any potential projects come forward that you didn't have the means to be able to help them, that you were not able to provide the assistance that they needed? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, that's a good question. I'm thinking off the top of my head, I can't really pinpoint any one thing. I would say more as we're developing this strategy, and I want to be very careful to give much credit to the private industry folks in meat processing. They created a meat processors guild, which gave us quicker access and opportunity to really do value propositions. We've tried some things. We have looked at that Taiwan market in September 2019, I believe. A group of buyers from Taiwan came to the States, and we were one of, I believe, 3 states they visited. 3 processors, part of that guild, met with them. It was clear that could be an aspiration, that could be a huge market for a Wyoming branded beef. But let's work on that ecosystem I talked about in Wyoming. But so there's a lot of meetings and learning. These processors never thought internationally. So there are things like that we will continue to do also. They're really focusing, I don't want to speak for them, but what's been talked about earlier, food security. Wyoming meats should be available in Wyoming, and then maybe look regionally, and then look at larger markets, perhaps in the US. But again, we are working with them to develop the strategy and then maintain it and see where it grows based on their needs. So it's a long-winded answer to your question, but I feel comfortable with where we're at so far, and we keep learning.
Yeah, one
And I'd
thing
be
that I,
happy to have Jill, if you have anything to add there, if I missed
yeah,
the one.
we'll let Jill in a minute. One of the concerns that's been brought to me various times are the sometimes the guidelines and slogging through the permitting process, et cetera, is rather difficult. But I think the guidelines for the business council are fairly tight, so they don't make bad loans. And I can appreciate that. Representative Larson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was kind of wondering if you could give I think there might have been discussion on this already, on the COVID dollars that maybe have went out already to these type of projects. Have we met? I mean, has everybody been taken care of already? I guess I'm having difficulty thinking there are more plants that are coming on.
Yeah, Representative Clausen, go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, so this bill is basically technical expertise, and the next one deals with grants. But I think this is an ongoing thing. The problem that we ran into when I got feedback from processors is the time frame was too short. So we came out in, I believe it was, and I don't know the exact dates, but anyway, we came out late in the year with this program, and so it was a reimbursement program. So they couldn't even order, if they needed upgraded in freezers to meet USDA standards, they couldn't order the stuff they needed in time or get the contractors in time. And this is the second bill. This doesn't deal with this bill. So, and another thing that might add some clarity to this group is this legislation is already in place. So anything you see in black on this bill is already there. This just adds to it, kind of a directive. Does that answer your question, Representative Larson, or you want me to keep going?
Yeah, so we'll get into that a bit in 54 when it comes to the stimulus funding, because it expired the 31st of December. If it's okay, Representative Fortner, got a question, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Who's getting most of these loans? Is it small business, small ranch families, big grocery market type, Safeway, Albertsons? Who's accumulating these grant monies? Can you tell us, please?
So one thing I know, Representative, we may have to bring in the Department of Ag, who's worked on this as well, but
I bet Ron can answer that one.
yeah, Ron can sure answer the business council part of it.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner, I don't want to put Jill on the spot. She has worked with Department of Ag on that first relief fund last fall. I apologize. I'm not really up to speed on the details of that.
Thank you, Ron. Jill, would you like to come in and help us out here?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to speak to the CARES Act program last fall that handed out meat processing money, that was to independently owned businesses. So it was the small guy or LLC, something more along those lines. It wasn't Safeway or that type of business. And to speak to the demand for the need for help and interest in processing, I can tell you that since early summer, I have consulted with over 50 either individuals or companies looking into processing in Wyoming. And that ranges from very small custom facilities to quite large. Does that answer your question?
Were you involved with the Department of Ag in doing some of this? And was any of the money that you helped with CARES funding?
I had a very small part with the Department of Ag and Governor's Office program that they ran. So that was all CARES money, that program. And if you set that aside more to what we're talking about with this bill, the programs that the Business Council runs, we've had some in process since I've been on board. I don't believe we have put anybody clear through on a meat processing grant or loan at the Business Council. We have connected them with USDA, as Ron mentioned, and sent them through the pipeline on some value-added federal programs, but that's where it stands right now.
Thank you. Representative Fortner.
So would small grocery stores like independent grocery store, somebody like that, would, if they wanted to apply for some of that funding, would they be able to get it? Thank you.
Go ahead, Jill.
Chairman Eklund, Representative Fortner, to clarify, are you speaking to the Business Council program?
Pardon me?
To clarify, are you speaking to Business Council programs or are you speaking to CARES Act programs?
Whatever program you would have that would fit for a small grocer, like 1 or 2 grocery stores, do you have anything, the funding that would go for a butcher facility for something of that sort available?
I think, Jill, this was, I'm going to get into this. I think I know what Representative Fortner's talking about. Before your time, we had these little grocery stores. Each small town had them, and there were, I think during your time there was one in Torrington, which you would have shopped at. Your family would have, where they had the beef processing and they had the meat counter both, and it was a full grocery store. They're usually small mom and pop shops. Does this apply to their meat processing facility as well?
So in reference to Business Council programs, I believe we'd have to look into that pretty closely to see exactly how the rules are and in consultation with the Attorney General to make sure, but we do have a suite of programs that fit most businesses. So a butcher shop or a further processing would probably find a home in a program at the Business Council.
Okay, and the one I'm thinking about, not far from where I am, they had their beef processing was actually separate from the store, I think, and they probably would have worked right into the thing. I don't see any more hands. Let's bring some more people in, Clarissa. Or if you wanted to add anything more, Jill, are you good? Okay, we have other people in the waiting room. Bring them on in, Clarissa.
We do, Mr. Chairman. I see Stacia Berry from the Department of Ag. I can bring her in if you'd like.
Okay, while she's coming in, Stacia is the Deputy Director, I think, of the Department of Ag. She's an attorney, she did most of the work on this House Bill 54 that's coming up. Or 51, which one is it? 51 that's coming up, but and in those changes. So Stacia, are you here?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we're here. Both Director Miyamoto and I are here, and we don't necessarily have any comments, but we can certainly answer questions on, of the department, or you can wait to take any testimony from us for House Bill 51 when you get to it.
Any questions? Could you bring us up to date? So you've had the ongoing program that was legislation, I think in Senate File 108 is what people are referring to it in 2018. You also have the CARES funding. How much money in each of those have you dedicated to this, to meat processing? Do you have those figures?
I'm going to talk about 108 and I can talk about our program.
Mr. Chairman, this is Doug Miyamoto, also with the Department of Agriculture, to speak to Senate File 108. That bill was directed towards the Business Council for Business Development in the meat processing realm as well, and not the Department of Ag, but as it relates to the CARES Act funding. So those were two separate pots. Senate File 108 was a chunk of dollars that went down the path of Business Council programs and assistance, and then CARES Act funding was really Governor Gordon's initiative that was part of the emergency response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And he asked us for assistance in managing that program and getting money out to the meat processors as quickly as we could. You asked about the amount of money that was in each of those programs. I don't know the status of funding with Senate File 108. Ron and Jill probably do have that answer. I don't. But as it relates to CARES Act dollars, I do have those numbers. Governor Gordon initially asked us to allocate $10 million for private businesses in the meat processing arena. So that was our initial allocation, was $10 million of funding. Of that $10 million, we had a pretty short and fast application period, I'm sorry. And so we took applications for as long as we could, giving our customers as much time as we could possibly give them to get us a plan and get what they could get ordered and have contracting work done quickly. So in our application process, we were able to allocate of that $10 million, we were able to obligate 5 million of that, so half of it. And that went to 40 some different applicants during that process. So that's the amount of money that still resides in the Department of Ag. Of that $5 million, so far, we've been able to reimburse those private businesses to the tune of about $3 million. So right now, today, we have $2 million of obligated funds that still reside in the Department of Agriculture. Those funds are spoken for. We don't know if we're going to get reimbursement requests on the remaining $2 million, but we have to assume that we will until we've received all of our receipts from people that have approved applications for the funding. And then we'll have a better status once we close out the acceptance period of reimbursement requests, which should happen within the next 2-3 weeks. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, you're muted.
Thank you. I think I'm just.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, there you go.
There I am. I'm just going to mute myself and hopefully I don't give anybody any feedback. So we will be getting into that more of the CARES funding part. But the committee has an overview of what's being done, has been done. To date, is there any funding that's come from the Department of Ag that is not CARES funding? Then that's the part we need to know.
Mr. Chairman, no, we have not granted any other funds.
Okay. All right, just so we know how this whole mechanism works. Committee questions? Yeah, Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, not so much a question, but maybe a comment and a shout out to the great job that the Department of Ag did in rolling out the emergency program through the CARES Act. I mean, this is kind of for these new guys. It's a pretty good exercise. The agency really did a pretty good job of getting out there without statute that framed exactly what they needed to do down to the cent, and they really got out there on the ground. And our second bill will actually extend that program. But I'd like to just make a comment and a shout out to the Department of Ag on the work they did. It's pretty phenomenal, really.
Thank you. Questions? Okay, Clarissa, do we have more people in the waiting room?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we have Penny Vance and Brad Tyndall. I'd be happy to bring them in.
Okay, go ahead and bring both of them in. Mrs. Vance, are you in now? There, go ahead when you're ready. I think you.
Yes, I am. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
go
Chairman
ahead.
and members of the committee. Yeah, my name is Penny Vance, and I'm the Ag and Local Foods Organizer for the Powder River Basin Resource Council. And I'm speaking, on behalf of our members, mostly just the ranchers in the fields. So, and I'm, we are in support of House Bill 54, the Wyoming Meatpacking Bill. We all know that a large percentage of the potential profit from Wyoming meat is actually shipped out of state. We develop the raw product here in the state, then we ship it out where much of the profit is made, and our ranchers are shortchanged in that process. Without the ability to be profitable, as a matter of fact, many are forced to sell out. That weakens our ag industry, while a lot of productive ag land is gradually becoming playground for the rich. And that's a serious tragedy that our ranchers in the entire state that really does warrant swift and drastic action. I realize that House Bill 54 isn't swift and drastic action, but it's certainly going in that direction. Our ag community is struggling because of a national food chain that has gradually become so monopolized by a small number of industrial giants, many of them foreign owned, by the way, who are gradually squeezing independent ranchers and farmers out of the picture by owning the entire industry, from raising cattle to tying up markets with contracting and controlling when the cattle are released into and out of feedlots and packing plants, to putting the finished products on the shelf. That's a pretty serious monopolization. That abomination in a country that has traditionally championed family farmers and ranchers is chipping away at the survival of Wyoming's third largest industry. It really is a pretty serious situation. Well, we're probably not able to take on the big ag monopolies directly. What I think we can do in Wyoming is, as we have the ability to construct our own industry ecosystem, as Mr. Guilford suggested, that would capture more of the beef industry profit chain. And that's what we believe 54 is about. We have an abundance of raw material out there grazing our pastures, and industry experts on horseback managing that raw material. Well, if we could just figure out how to capture more of the food chain that steals the profits from our livestock industry, we could save our ranchers and farmers and go a long way towards reversing Wyoming's deficits. The expansion of meatpacking plants and the support for those businesses by our Wyoming Business Council are an important part of that vision. When COVID funds become available, Wyoming citizens became available. Wyoming citizens jumped at the opportunity to expand and build plants. We have one of those plants about to open in Wyoming, and it will be a USDA certified plant. That's very exciting. So if the funds are there, we can do a lot. What we lack is a statewide plan to develop this ag industry ecosystem. And HB 54 does provide some guidance to help start shaping a statewide plan so Wyoming itself can become a more complete meat factory, if you will. I do remember when there was a meatpacking plant in every community in Wyoming. And restoring that network of packing plants throughout the state is a critical first step in solving this really tragic drain of economic profit from Wyoming's meat production to big ag operations, who have shown that they have no qualms about decimating our family farms and ranches. So our thought is that we really must develop our own livestock ecosystem from hoof to table if we're going to save our ag industry and, in fact, the economy of Wyoming. So our members are strongly in support of House Bill 54. We thank you for working on this bill, and thank you for also the opportunity to comment.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Vance. I guess I'd have a few things to add. For a long time, committee will be dependent on the packers. Our concern is that we've given up the product. They're out of state, maybe out of nation. maybe somebody could answer this for me. I don't, in your vision, and you talk about this ecosystem in in the beef industry or lamb or pork industry in Wyoming, has there been much talk about one of the things the meat packers do that an individual processor can't do is the heavy duty efficiency by using the byproducts of there are parts of the offal that are generally discarded, and I think the only thing I can think of that they always use is a hide. They keep that. But is there talk about a co-op among these processors within the state so that you could create a plant big enough to develop this byproduct industry? Go ahead, Mrs. Vance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, it is a complex picture, and there are a lot of parts and pieces that need to fall into place. And all of the byproducts are an important piece of that. What I would suggest, if you don't mind, is that we allow Brad Tyndall from CWC address some of that, because they are looking into those very factors in developing our packing plant industry.
Okay. I guess I just unmuted myself there. So I think if you were to look in your email, you would have a email sent by Mr. Tyndall. Am I correct, sir? You sent that yesterday, I think. And I'm going to go ahead and let you talk a little bit about your program there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. Yes, the college is fully going down this path, and we're thinking in terms of, as Mr. Goldberg said, that kind of the meats ecosystem that we have to look. And the thing that I've seen in both House Bill 54 and 51 is a mention of workforce training and a mention of marketing, but really no dollars for this. And so I'd like to speak to both, but a little bit a background. My background is in ag econ, and I am the president of Central Wyoming College. And there is so much activity in this. People really have caught the fire. So just yesterday, I was at the Farm and Ranch Days in Fremont County where I presented. And then also we had Bryce Brenton of Frank's present, and he bought out what was Jared Hamilton in Hudson, which was Wyoming Custom Meats before that. And they're going big, and they're just doing Wyoming meats only. They got the USDA inspection. They're keeping a little bit of custom exempt for, I believe it's 2 days a week, and USDA 5 days a week. Retail outlets already purchased a facility in Hudson, purchased something that they're renovating and improving on in Casper, and then there's other cities. They buy entire herds because they do a lot of quality control and try to get a sense of the grade of the meat. We also have in our community, Wyoming, what's the Genuine Meats of Wyoming, Bo Sheets, working on his USDA right now in our community. We also have, as everyone knows, 307 Meats, Kelsey Christensen, and he's presenting today at that Farm and Ranch Day. And I just listed other kind of things there with Catholic College has to ship they have their own ranch, and they ship all their things to Colorado for slaughter. We have been approached because we're getting a lot of press for this workforce piece. Folks from New York saying, we need Wyoming meat now. We want to sell it now. This is happening. And now's the time, I think, to really act. And people have been coming to us and saying, well, how do you establish a small plant? And so our consultant is Jack Schmidt, and he's being asked by others saying, you need to become an LLC and provide more advice. What we have so far is a Wyoming Works grant that got us a mobile slaughter unit, just the slaughter component only. With CARES Act money, we got us a mobile cut and wrap, essentially a park, but there's refrigerators and freezers and vehicles that we can move. Essentially, it kind of looks like an oil and gas camp, but basically for slaughter and cut and wrap, and working on trying to get that all approved, hopefully eventually at the USDA level. And there's just a whole lot of demand and people need those workers tomorrow. And Frank's is advertising and they need people yesterday. We have Boshi's training people on his own. This is happening and we need to really support this. And I think the piece that we need is support in the workforce development, because the general notion of the old big packing plants is that you hire immigrant labor or something like that and you pay people very little. What's happening now, it's a different market. It's the age of craft beef. And that's wonderful for Wyoming because people want Wyoming beef. And luckily, I think what you're seeing even, with Frank's, they're only buying Wyoming and that brand means something. And the people in New York who asked us to help facilitate the beef that they wanted to sell there, as they said, we need assurance that is only Wyoming meat. So this is good. And I think that, so what we put together is a business plan on, let me talk about marketing first. The letter that I sent didn't talk about the marketing piece. So I was thinking very much just scholarships for the workforce. But Stephanie Smith of Wyoming PBS has gotten Emmy Awards for Farm to Fork. And if you watch any Wyoming PBS, you may know of Stephanie's work. Well, with the budget cuts, Stephanie is now on her own and does contract work because Wyoming PBS, which is on my campus and reports to me, had to let her go. No performance issues. She's wonderful. And so the story that needs to be told to keep it Wyoming beef and to make sure this isn't incenting or helping businesses outside of the state is the marketing piece. I believe that if we do exactly what Frank is saying, with every cut of meat, every animal we get, people have been talking about this with BitChain and other marketing finance tools to really hit the story of the meat. And through, I think there's a proposal, I think I have the numbers already, but really it's $150,000 to really ensure that if the meat is from Wyoming, we tell the story, the packaging has the barcode or the symbol on it that you can access those stories. And we really hit home the Wyoming. And that's how we kind of protect the Wyoming product. If you're not Wyoming, you don't get this service. And so I think there's a huge opportunity with the talent we have and the avenues we have to get that information out there so that we can really make sure it stays Wyoming meat. On the workforce side, we can't just assume it's going to happen, that if somebody in Sheridan says, hey, I want to start hiring, somebody give me some labor. What happens in that model is just anybody stumbles on in. They may not have the good skill set. What we've established, and we have this approved through the Wyoming Community College Commission, is a 15-credit craft meat processing, fast track, 1 semester program, 15 credits. And people need this, and they need it now. And either in House Bill 51 or 54, there needs to be, we priced it out at $404,000 to have this apprenticeship, full ride, room and board, bring them wherever they are across the state, and really a cram course if we're taking this seriously. And just assuming that people will kind of show up and the college can do this is not realistic. We get $99 a credit. That's what we charge tuition. The state gives us about that much in reimbursement, and that doesn't pay for much of anything because it's a low cost, as free as possible model. And what we need is full ride scholarship dollars. If we're really going to do this thing, we house them, we board them, we get it in and out, and we send them back to Sheridan or Cheyenne for 307 meets. And there's an interest there. And I just say that. So my recommendation and hope is that either House Bill 51 or 54 can add $404,000 for an apprenticeship scholarship, room and board, full ride program, and $150,000 for those who do Wyoming meat, that we tell their story. And, in both cases, we'd expend all the dollars by December 31st, 2021. And there's a whole lot going out there, and I'd be glad to try to answer some questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Tyndall, maybe you can answer this. If you can't, I'm hoping somebody can, possibly Department of Ag. Can we use CARES Act funding to fund a program, a training program at the college level? And I guess I will have to wait for your answer on that, and also from the Department of Ag, if you can add anything to it. The 54 bill doesn't have any provision for that. The well, now which one? Yeah.
51.
And then the 51 is the other bill, the meat processing. That one could be amended into it if need be. I don't know if we'd even have to do it if well, we probably would, but go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do know that workforce training dollars is eligible for CARES Act because we've got a whole lot of CARES Act money for academic programs that we applied directly to the governor for, and then it got approved by Attorney General. So I'm trying to remember how much we got for the cut and wrap training. What it requires is that any of the personnel costs had to be expended by December 31st. That's the real tricky piece on this is, we can't hire somebody permanently as much as, we'd want to. We'd have to pick it up with our own dollars. But we have received quite a bit of funding from CARES Act. All our students got money through the CARES Act. We had to distribute, I can't even remember how much that was. It was a whole lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars in that regard. So I think we're good there. And then looking at the House bills, in House Bill 54, it does say on page 6, develop and administer programs to educate producers and the public on meat processing and the Wyoming livestock industry, tours, academic programs, and communication plans. But there's no funds for that. And in House Bill 51, what page is that? Page 5, lines really 18 through 20 said, providing workforce training and converting state inspected facilities to federally inspected. But the key line there is, the key wording there is providing workforce training, but there's no funds for that. So we said we put pen to paper and calculated those numbers for both the communication, came up with $150,000 to tell Wyoming story and $404,000 for the workforce training piece.
Okay, I am, Aaron's on board here. So we would not have to amend anything in. I don't know about the funding. This is kind of, so the new bill we're going to work on is conceptual and it would be an open-ended deal. We know the old, and we're on the wrong bill. Go ahead, Aaron.
Mr. Chairman, so if we decide to go down this road, I think it would probably be appropriate if this bill advances through the House that we work on this when it gets to the Senate, just as a matter of time and the matter of complexity that's going to have to go into if we add something, or we can make sure that that it is covered through the Department of Ag's through the CARES Act funds. But in this meeting, I think it's going to be a little much to work this in, but I think we'll have plenty of opportunity for comment and a place to put this in when it goes to the Senate side.
Representative Western, you were wanting to speak?
I second Representative Clausen's comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay. Well, I didn't think that was a motion, but okay. Thank you, Mr. Tyndall. That's good information to have. If we're able to, I think we're able to amend it in as we continue with the evolution of two bills that are really confusing. We'll try to fold that in if necessary. Clarissa, do we have other people wanting to talk?
Mr. Chairman, we have Brett Moline, so I'll bring him in.
Hello, Brett. Go ahead when you're on and ready.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. You've heard from me before, so I'll be uncharacteristically brief. Supporting the bill, supporting the amendments. What I look at this bill doing is help facilitate my members that are raising meat animals to meet the consumer demand So in support of the amendment and the support of the bill, and with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd sit for any questions.
Committee, any questions? Looks like you're off the hook here, Brett. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee.
Do we have more people, Clarissa?
Mr. Chairman, we have two other folks who are in the waiting room. They have not raised their virtual hand, indicating that they'd like to speak, but I'd be happy to bring them in if you'd like.
Okay, well, they might not want to speak on this bill. We'll be doing the other one in a bit. So
okay,
unless they raise their hand, they probably are fine. Okay. Yeah, we're done with public testimony. So committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
It's been moved by Western, seconded by Clausen. Discussion. Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the amendment that I emailed out to everybody and went through at the beginning of this, of our presenting this bill.
Been moved and seconded, moved by Clausen, seconded by Western. Go ahead and explain well, we already kind of went through it. Committee, what I'll tell you is we get into these bills and you start amending them and the amendments are hard to read. I spent 2 hours tracking through the second bill. We'll work on 51. 54 is kind of the same thing. Along with the motion in the second, we're gonna, I think we may amend the motion because what I intend to do is bring a substitute bill to the floor when we come back. If we pass this bill, we'll bring a substitute bill that will be in the form it's supposed to be without anybody in committee of the whole having to read in the amendment. Large amendments are nearly impossible. The one on the other one took me 2 hours and nobody's going to spend a lot of time on that. Yes, Representative Clausen, go
If
ahead.
the second's fine with it, I would amend my motion that we present, that move this amendment and have it presented or give LSO enough leeway to present it as a substitute bill. If the second's all right with that.
You okay, Cyrus? Yep, he's good. Representative Wharf, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, having heard what you just said, I will vote for this bill. I can tell you I'm a no vote as it is right now, but you know, I do think I would support doing a substitute bill and maybe working on it. I think the last testimony that we received, that to me was stuff that I thought was worthy of trying to incorporate into this. So I would encourage you, as we come up with a substitute bill, to look at how we add the training component into this bill, if in fact you feel that that's where it's best suited. So I will support that effort, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Representative. And believe me, I've looked through bills like this before, and that's why substitute bills are important. This one then would remain an ag interim subject topic. It would be an interim bill, and I think they carry a little more weight if we as a committee support the bill. I've done this before where you got into committee and it was people couldn't read the amendment and it would get killed in committee then, and it was an important bill. And I had to go back, have a substitute bill written and then brought it as an individual bill, and I don't want to do it that way. I want the support of the Ag Committee going into it. So is there any other discussion? Does everyone understand what we're going to do? We'll be voting on the amendment to the bill, which changes it pretty dramatically.
Question.
A question being called. Roll call, Clarissa.
Nope, not on the amendment. We're on the
No, not
amendment.
on, okay, raise your, all in favor. Yeah, I'll shake the rest off. We're back to Robert's rules. Everybody in favor, raise your hand. Okay, the amendment is passed. Are we ready to vote on the bill?
Question.
Looks like we're ready. Question being called. Go ahead, Clarissa.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote for House Bill 54, Wyoming Meat Packing Initiative, as amended. Representative Blackburn.
Are you there, Jim? We see a forest, Jim Blackburn. We'll kind of keep the vote open here for a bit. Go, continue on.
Representative Clausen.
Aye.
Representative Fortner.
Aye.
Representative Heiner.
Nay.
Representative Larson.
No.
Representative Western.
Aye.
Blackburn, aye.
Did you get that, Clarissa?
I did, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Representative Worf.
Aye.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
7 ayes, 2 noes.
Okay. Thank you, committee. So that bill will go to the floor. It will come in the form of a substitute bill. And believe me, you'll prefer that over trying to read in amendments. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 51, and it is on meat processing. This is a program that deals with CARES funding. So the committee, in a flurry, and using part of the special session ability that we had, put this bill together. The department or had directed the Department of Ag to put the bill together. And I'm going to, in the amendment, I'm going to have them explain what they do. The major part of it is changing the date to kind of an open-ended discussion. We have money in this account. There may be other money to come. It would be federal dollars rather than state dollars, but it would be using that funding. I think it has that training component in it as well. But what I would like to do is have the Department of Ag, they were the ones that helped us draft up the amendment, walk through their changes. So Clarissa, are they on hand right now to do that? And I'll probably turn it over to you, Stacia, I think. So go ahead when you're ready to work through the bill and explain the changes. And I as much as we can, we'll work off the old bill that they can read. Would that be fine?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if there are questions as we walk through this, feel free to interject and ask, especially as it relates to how the program that we did run that expired on December 30th of 2020. As you walk through this bill on page 1, the one comment that we would make that doesn't necessarily require an amendment is section 1 is primarily background and resolution type language. You're welcome to leave that in the bill, but we just wanted to note that WDA doesn't have to have that language in the bill to implement it. And that's certainly a decision that the committee can look at if they want that to keep section 1 language. So as you walk through page 1, followed by page 2 and page 3, those are sort of background statements that talk about the coronavirus pandemic and the effect that it had on producers and meat processing in the state, and sort of set the background for what the committee put together for this bill to do. So to get into, and no pun intended, the meat of this bill, head to page 4. Thank you. And then we can jump into some of the real questions that we have. In section 2, it starts going through the definitions. And one thing that we noticed is under eligible business, subsection 2, little I, letter A, it says that an eligible business was established on or before the enactment of any order issued by a state or local government of Wyoming that required closures of businesses. Our recommendation would be to delete this provision only because this language creates a conflict later in the bill because it talks about being able to start new meat processing plants. And if this requirement remains, then it has to be a meat processing plant that already existed when orders started coming out by state and local governments. So we would recommend deleting that provision just to make sure that we didn't restrict participation from new meat plants. If there's no questions on that, if you can turn to page 5, still under those requirements of what is deemed an eligible business, we added letter E, which was just to require that the business be in good standing with the Wyoming Secretary of State. This was a provision that we added or would suggest adding just because it was very helpful in the program that we ran this fall as a gate cut, if you will, to make sure that it's a legitimate business if they have to have that good standing piece with the Wyoming Secretary of State's office. So that was the idea behind adding that language. Next, moving on to letter B, you'll see just a change in the name of the program so that it would have the same name as the program that we ran last fall, which is the Wyoming Meat Processing Expansion Grant Program. We added that just for consistency's sake so that processors knew or were familiar with the program and could jump back in expecting that same type of entity. So that's just a naming change. As you move down on line 12, you'll see that we would suggest striking some language, and that is striking experiencing business interruptions due to the COVID-19 public health crisis. And we suggest striking that language because the meat processors weren't suffering interruptions due to public health. They were actually seeing more business than they'd ever seen before. And so we just didn't want to limit those businesses because their business activity has actually increased because of the need for using those processing facilities. And then on that line 14, as you get to the next strikeout, this is certainly something that the committee can give us some feedback on, but we noticed that the word stipend was in this bill. And so that when researching what a stipend might look like, we wanted to see what the committee was really wanting to do, if it was sort of an entitlement grant to give to all of these meat processing plants, or if it were to run more like the program that we had run in the fall. In the fall, the requirement, as Representative Clausen mentioned, was a 50-50 reimbursement for all the investments that the processors were making. So everyone that participated in our program fronted the costs and then sent us their expenses, and we paid them 50% back on all of those eligible expenses. So we recommend switching to a cost share just so that producers have skin in the game. But certainly if the will of the committee is for it to be a strict grant or stipend where it's just a full give to the applicants, that's certainly the will of the committee. But we had changed it to cost share to be consistent with the last program. Certainly up to the committee to do what it will, but that was the thinking behind that. And so you'll see throughout the rest of the bill where stipend was mentioned, we put cost share. So that's certainly the prerogative of the committee to have it be whatever you desire to do for participants in the program. Are there any questions on that before I move on?
There you go. Yeah.
Any
thank
questions,
you.
committee?
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. And I'm sorry.
Are you chairman? Okay, go ahead.
I'm back. Thank you for that explanation. And what's that? Okay. Representative Larson, go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Do we have an amendment in that we're looking at? Because I don't have it. Is it been emailed to us?
Yes, and I'm gonna bring you a paper copy over if you can't find it in your emails. It'll just take me a second to get it over there. I think you're in the next room. I copied off several of them. Thank you for that explanation, Stacia. I
think we have a little more.
Or we have more.
Yeah, I had just, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I had
I
just
know.
paused to answer a few
I
questions.
know. I knew that. So I was gone for a couple minutes getting some water. And yes, there is a difference between the stipend and the cost share. And I didn't even question that when Caleb drew up the amendment because I presumed it might be the committee's will on it, but we'll discuss it when we get into the discussion of the bill and see what they want to do.
All
Go
right.
ahead with your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moving further down in that section, line number 16, this may address some of the committee's concerns in earlier conversations about funds leaving the state, because we would suggest striking mobile and modular. And we also, the additional reason for striking that language is we didn't want to unduly restrict participants in this program into those two narrow categories. So we suggested just striking that language. Down on line 17 and line 18, you'll see we suggested to strike units or on both lines because they're a meat processing facility. It doesn't unit, we didn't think was necessary language. And then on 19, we added a bit of language just because there was the ability for state inspected facilities to upgrade their inspection to a federal inspection level. We added in there the opportunity for those custom inspected facilities that wanted to upgrade their inspection level to state or federal inspection. Then at the bottom of that page, you'll just see a word change into cost share instead of stipend. Then moving on to the next page that we have an amendment on, which is in the next section, discussing what the cost share will entail. Under little I, we would suggest striking requiring a business plan and any other. That language didn't seem necessary for meat plants because they, just so you all know the background on their process, when they're working with either state or federal inspectors, they have to send in plan review packets, which goes through what their entire facility looks like, how everything's set up, what their safety and sanitation plans are. And so since they already do all of that paperwork, we felt like adding the requirement of a business plan to all of the paperwork they were already doing was a bit unduly burdensome and wouldn't necessarily benefit the program in any way that we didn't already have with the documents that they're already required to get that inspection. So we recommended striking that language under number 2. Then the next amendment that we suggested takes you down into letter F on page 8. So we're switching to that next page, and we added the language under letter F, the department may insert utilize program funding to conduct and contract for random audits. We just wanted a little bit of clarifying language there on funding for how to be able to do those audits. And then finally in letter G, you'll just see that we didn't know that it was necessary that it be reappropriated, given that there's discussions that it may be potentially new CARES Act dollars that come out from the federal government or the current one. So we changed most of the reappropriations just to appropriate it. And I know that right now on line 20, it says that this bill would be for $20 million. And we just wanted to note that this amount is significantly higher than, as you've heard, we we dispersed through the program that we completed last fall. As we mentioned, we were allocated $10 million, able to encumber almost 5, and so far have been able to pay out almost $3 million, just so that you have the statistics from this program to guide as you shape the amounts for this program, the new program. On the end of that paragraph, you will see that we added the language "or any similarly awarded federal funds corresponding with the coronavirus pandemic." We just added that to try and add as much flexibility for this program as possible to be eligible for whatever funds that the legislature is trying to direct its way, so that it wouldn't necessarily be pinned into the 2020 CARES Act dollars. So that just provides some flexibility. On the next page, you will see.
Stacia.
Yes.
This is Chairman Eklund. So in the amendment, I think there was some, when Kayla Spencer, our LSO attorney, drafted the amendment, there was concern that we might end up leaving appropriated and reappropriated in there.
Okay.
Do you think that would be beneficial to the amendment, to the process? I'm not sure. Either way, it's appropriated.
I agree with you in that way, Mr. Chairman. As long as it gets appropriated, if they need it to say reappropriated or appropriated, either is fine. We were just trying to simplify a little bit, but whatever, we can let Kayla be the guide on that, on what the appropriate wording is there. As you move on to the next page, you'll just see another change from stipend to cost share payments authorized under the Act. And then our suggestion, because I know that the committee has talked a lot about changing dates, is that you would just strike line 8 through 22 on page 10, because we anticipate that since this is the premise behind the dollars for this program is federal, we assume that those deadlines will come with those federal dollars. And so if you're worried about the specific dates in 2021 that you want to do, you can potentially strike lines 8 through 22 to remove those specific dates. And then just, you'll see in letter H, we recommended that having the program expire December 30th of 2022, so that then it gives us this year of 2021 to carry out whatever those CARES Act dollars are, and then can be revisited by the legislature if they'd like to. But then one of the biggest complaints that Representative Clausen certainly heard was the time frame. Granted, our program was a little over 90 days, and so this will certainly be longer, but pushing that out to 2022 does allow a lot more flexibility for the people participating in the program. So those are the amendments that we suggested. We'd be happy to answer any questions about the program or those amendments if there's any clarification that we can offer, Mr. Chairman.
There. Little buttons. We have a question from Representative Fortner. Go ahead when you're ready, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Out of the $3 million you have loaned out, is it all to one person or is it to 3 different people?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner, that's a good question. So of the $3 million, so this is not a loan. This was all on a reimbursable basis, and these are dollars that have actually been repaid to processors. That goes to, there are 40 completed contracts for this program. And so those $3 million are spread out over roughly 36 different custom state and federal plants across the state at different varying levels.
Is that at a 50-50 or just a grant process?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Fortner, that is at the 50-50 level. So there's actually been $6 million so far spent on meat processing expansion in the state, 50% of that being invested by the private sector itself in order to get that match from these dollars.
Thank you.
Yeah, good questions, Bill. Thank you. More questions, committee? Okay, I think we'll go to public comment. Do we have others who, and Department of Ag, why don't you stay with us and we may have more questions for you. Do we have other people in the waiting room, Clarissa?
Mr. Chairman, we do have Margaret Lohman. Unfortunately, I think she may have raised her hand after House Bill 54 was moved, but we can bring her in to see if she'd like to comment on this bill.
Come on in, Mrs. Lohman, and go ahead when you're logged in. There you are. Go ahead when you're ready. You're muted.
There.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, technology. This is my first time doing this. And I sent you a comment, but the comment was based on what I can read from your site.
Go ahead and share your comment.
It was just that, trying to remember, let's see, I'll get it up. I was commenting, my husband used to own an organic beef business. And so it was based on his experiences. And he would be a better person to be talking about this than myself. But when one of the comments I want to make is when you go to your site and you start looking at these bills, it's very difficult to decipher what's going on. You're very much in the dark as far as understanding what's being talked about. So of course my comment has to do with that. And one of my comments was your argument for spending this money is that that these plants, these meat processing plants are a place where the virus is transmitted really easily. Well, that's, from my perspective, I know that these meat processing plants are really highly regulated and they're very clean. And I know that the virus was transmitted, at least in Colorado, because they were housing workers in big buildings in the fairgrounds. And so it was the living conditions of the workers was why you were having these big breakouts of the virus. It had nothing to do with the cleanliness of the plant. So that was one of my comments. And then just, I just feel like I'm very conservative. I feel like spending money just because you have it isn't a good idea. I disagree with that. I don't think I have an economics degree. I don't think, throwing money at any kind of an agricultural entity is going to make them viable. You're either economically viable or you aren't. And so, and I've been listening to you guys talking about, okay, we're gonna, fix the ag community in Wyoming. And I grew up on a farm, and it's like the economy is either there or it isn't. And government interference isn't necessarily a great thing. In fact, you twist the fabric and you're not necessarily incentivizing anything other than transfers, if that makes sense.
So I didn't find anywhere in the bill. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I found nothing in the bill that indicated that the virus was being transported because of the product itself. And I understand your your concern with that. As far as, I think the vice chairman might have a few comments on the concerning some of the other things. As far as following what we do, I agree, it's difficult. I've been saying it on the floor and in committee meetings that right now, under this virtual setting, I need my grade school grandchildren to intern with me so that I can get my computer to work. And I can imagine the difficulties you're having at the sites trying to find out what we are doing. This particular bill is federal funds. It'll be sent to Wyoming and either used here or somewhere else. And that's what we're considering in House Bill 51. Many of us do agree that more government isn't, in fact, probably everybody on this committee agrees, more government isn't necessarily better, but it is what it is. And committee, any questions for Mrs. Lohman? Okay, I must have covered what my vice chair had.
I do have something else to say. The reason my husband's he got out of the business is because it was organic grass-fed beef, and he was shipping it around the United States, and the profit margin kept getting less and less because shipping costs got more and more. And so it didn't make sense to be in that business anymore. You know, getting a grant isn't going to make any difference. I mean, it would have put off the inevitable over time, but he still would have gone out of business. So, you know, throwing money at businesses, ag businesses, any businesses, if the economy can't support it, the economy can't support it. And so, you know, that's my strong feeling about spending federal funds, whether they're there or not. I'm a taxpayer and I still have to pay for all that. And I just disagree with it. You know, I disagree with any added spending right now.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I raise organic wheat. I can attest that selling organic beef isn't something I even started into because the market simply wasn't there. The logistics weren't there. The processing plants weren't there. So anyway, committee or Clarissa, are there other, thank you, Mrs. Lohman. Are there other people in the waiting room?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, there are other folks in the waiting room. If they could raise their hand if they'd like to speak, that would be great.
Zoom.
I'm not seeing anyone else who has raised their hand. I can bring them in if you'd like, Mr. Chairman, or
well,
we can close comment.
If they haven't raised their hands, they probably they're good. We'll end public testimony unless they can't figure out how to raise their hands, but which will happen, and hopefully we're not cutting off anybody. So we will, committee, what's your pleasure on the bill? I would, before I start that, Department of Ag, stand nearby. We may bring you back into the committee discussion at some point. But committee, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Larson.
Yes, can I ask the Department of Ag one more question, or a couple maybe? The main one is if we just get down to the bottom line, there are dollars still available, and can those dollars still be spent without this bill?
Let me answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, so there are dollars encumbered for this program. However, the way that the special session laws were written, the authority for this program ran out on the 30th of December 2020. And so what we'll have to do is we will close out this program at the end of this month. We're sending out emails this week to all the participants to see if they have any other reimbursements that they want to do, give them a couple of weeks to send that in. And then by the end of February, we should be able to close this program out and then release back all of those dollars that we didn't use. But we can't, without a new program and new authorization and new authority, we can't reappropriate any of those dollars through the old program.
Mr.
That
Chairman.
answer, go ahead.
Thank
Follow-up?
you. Yeah, I'm kind of upset that I didn't see this amendment last night. I have no idea what it's doing, and it frustrates me a lot. And I guess my final point is if we just change the date on this, would that be enough?
I think I'll respond to that. My intention is to do the same thing with this bill as we did to the last. And I apologize. We've been trying to sort out what it is exactly we're trying to do and what we can do. The bill came as we were going, or the amendment came as we were leaving around 7 o'clock last night. I spent a few hours looking at it to make sure it tracked in the way it is. The way we're going to do this one will be the same as the last bill, though. It will be an amendment for a substitute bill. The same way it will not, we won't have this amendment the same as it is. There are not a lot of significant changes. We work in cost share instead of stipend, and we can't just change the dates. Doesn't read in very well. I guess we could, but I'd prefer that we did a substitute bill, and if it passes the Ag Committee, then it would go on general file and go into the Committee of the Whole. There is one other option, though I don't really want to postpone it much longer, and that is to have a substitute bill drawn up. If members are unsure of what the amendment actually does, we could do that. And when we come back in 1st of March, work this, be able to read the substitute bill. I think I can have that done without a motion or anything. Well, maybe I can't. I'm not sure what I can do there, but we can have a substitute bill that you would be able to read later. Representative Fortner, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, will this vote be on the amendment? Do I hear you right? And another question I have is, if this bill does not pass, if we don't pass House Bill 51, how does that affect House Bill 54? Thank you.
Representative Clausen, go ahead.
Chairman, so, all right, if I'm tracking this right, so we're just discussing the bill right now. We haven't moved the amendment as far as the point of order goes. The two bills are separate, but this one has the funding for the Department of Ag to continue on with their program. So this is the CARES Act funding bill. Is that clear in the kind of where you're looking?
And I don't believe we've moved or seconded.
We haven't moved or seconded anything. We're just
So
discussing
we're
the bill.
still in discussion. So go ahead, Representative Worf.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I kind of have some of the same concerns. We just passed a substitute bill we haven't seen. I'm not so sure that I want to do that again. I would almost rather, if you're comfortable, Mr. Chairman, I'm wondering if we shouldn't table this bill and give us time to actually get the substitute bill written so this committee can actually see what we're doing. I just think that's a better process. I don't like voting on things that I don't know what it is. And I have a lot of questions about the amendment. Some of the stuff I didn't like, but it's such a balled up. It's just too confusing right now for me to support it. And I do think we're better off to table it and get the bill worked up so that we can have it ready for when we come back in March.
Okay, Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So so I understand this correctly, this will help fund the Department of Ag through COVID. The other bill, the funding comes through Endow or the Business Council. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, follow up. I guess where I'm standing on this is I'm probably a no vote on this amendment as well as the bill. And then we can write a bill between now and part of the live session. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Clausen.
Mr. Chairman, so everybody's clear with this. This amendment is the amendment that the Department of Ag went through line by line. They explained it very well, I would say. There's no substantial changes. It's rewording and retiming for the program. It strikes the stuff we did in session law so they can move forward with the program. It's not a hugely substantial amendment, even though it reads in strange. We do apologize. We're tightening up our committee. Part of our committee tightening we'll have a lot of this stuff ahead of time. We're going to work with agencies. We're going to have these amendments done days in advance. We'll have copies that you can read in, but we've worked this amendment or this bill a ton. These amendments aren't substantial changes. We've went through them line by line. Everybody had a full chance to take a look, to ask questions with the Department of Ag about the amendments. And we can go back through these amendments with the Department of Ag if anybody is just completely unclear, but they're not substantial. And I hope that qualms anybody's concerns.
Representative Heiner, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if we're talking about the amendment or the bill right now, but on the amendment, one of the things that we struck.
Yeah.
Yes. One of the things in the amendment that was being struck was the mobile processing. And I don't know, does that affect what we heard from testimony from the college, Central Wyoming College, where they do have a mobile processing plant for training? Is this going to limit them from any funds to be able to go forward with that?
Yeah. Is the Department of Ag still there?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative. Yeah, in our initial program, we just classified everything as a meat processing facility and didn't differentiate between mobile units and other, permanent meat processing facilities. The only reason we took that out was because meat processing facilities can come in many shapes and sizes. And if that facility is capable of expanding the state of Wyoming's ability to process meat, they were eligible for our program. And so that was why, we thought it would be easier to implement without specifying which types of meat processing facilities were eligible for reimbursement. As it comes to university and community college involvement in the CARES Act funding, they weren't eligible for our program. Our program was specifically directed towards on-the-ground implementation of expansion of meat processing. There wasn't any funds that were put aside for training or anything else. This was an emergency response program, and all of that money was directed to on-the-ground production in the meat processing realm. So all of this money went to private businesses that could relieve the strain on the food supply system. And we were intentionally trying to direct as much resource as we could to the people cutting the meat, I guess is a simple way to say that. The other aspect of mobile units and for consideration of this committee is that we've heard, comments from the committee in the past about the desire to keep money in the state of Wyoming and ensure that none of that money leaked outside of our borders. I think this would also address that concern to a degree. I hope that answers your question.
I don't see any hands. A question. So the training mentioned in House Bill 51 is training from the Department of Ag on how to set up their facilities, probably. I'm trying to find it. It was in here and mentioned by the community college president, the director. I can't find it, but yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'm having a hard time remembering off the top of my head. I don't recall seeing training in House Bill 51. It might be there, but I don't. I'm having an issue remembering where exactly that would be. I don't recall it being in there.
That's okay. So that has not been a part of the program.
No.
Okay. So committee, I think that I've never done this before, so I would entertain a motion to draft a substitute bill that we would then work in March.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Vice Chair Clausen.
So right now, we haven't worked on an amendment. I mean, the substitute bill would be with the amendment we have in, or with the amendment we have now. So we haven't moved this bill. We're just discussing the bill. We're getting clarity. And what I would like to do going forward with this is, if anybody has any questions, anybody has any concerns with these amendments, we even have enough time left. We can have Department of Ag go back through their amendments if there's not clarity. I'd like to make sure everybody's clear as mud, since this is a new committee. There's not substantial changes, but we have everybody we need in the room, and we have the time to do it. I'd feel better if we made everybody feel comfortable about this amendment and go that direction.
Okay. Representative Wharf.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would make the motion that we table this. I don't want to be rushed on this, and I feel like I'm being rushed. I want to be able to process this. I just barely was able to pull it up. And like you said, I know they walk through it, but it is just hard to follow all this. I mean, and I guess if I would just like to make that motion that we table this.
Okay, would you consider, before we get the second, Representative Wharf, consider in that motion, table it until we have a substitute bill to work at the next meeting?
I would make a formal motion that we table this with the intent that it's brought back as a substitute bill. And that substitute bill can incorporate anything, including this proposed amendment.
Mr. Chairman.
We have a second. Let's go ahead and have discussion. Vice Chairman Clausen.
I'd move against tabling this. I'd like to speak against this motion of tabling this bill. We have everybody in the room. We've had description or this amendment broken out. We have another 40 minutes before we go on to the floor. If anybody's not comfortable, we can go through and re-describe what this bill does. Again, we can go through the amendments. We probably have enough time to have it drafted with the amendments in before we go in this meeting. So I would rather we look this over. Everybody can get as comfortable as they want. There's no substantial changes with these amendments. They're mostly housekeeping. Going back to the original program, the Department of Ag has administered the first program without any legislation on emergency rules. And this kind of carries forward what they were doing. So I would speak against the motion to table.
Question on the motion.
Well, I'm not yet. Is everybody done talking? All right. So all those in favor of the motion to table this and bring a substitute bill that would resemble the amendments as they were drafted, that we would take up in March, raise your hand. So that motion has passed. So this bill will come before you as a substitute bill, and I'll have Kayla draft up a substitute bill, and we'll probably work it first when we come back in March. If that's okay with the committee. So committee, with that, we're done.
Mr.
I
Chairman,
appreciate your work and patience. Part of the problem, and I've got some people that want to still talk here, but I'll get to you. Thank you for your patience with the new committee chairman and for a new committee. It's been pretty interesting this morning. Go ahead, Representative Wharf.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I'm just going to show you my ignorance again, but would it be possible that sometime during the month of February, we could have a committee meeting to discuss this bill once the substitute bill is ready? I just don't know the appropriateness of that, but I don't know why we couldn't have another Zoom meeting, but maybe you can answer that, Mr. Chairman.
To do that, I'd have to go to management council and get permission. I think we could do it without it being counted as a day in the session. It'd be a special provision to have a meeting before we vote before March. I'm not sure we'll gain much is, one of my concerns, because we can start this thing up in March. What we can do is send the substitute bill out and have everybody review it with comments and work on it that way. And I don't think I have to have special permission from anyone to allow the committee to do that. Would that work for you?
Yeah, I just think it would be good rather than last minute having to look at it again. That's just a suggestion, Mr. Chairman, but I'll follow your lead.
All right, I'll try to get that done ahead of time. Go ahead, Representative Blackburn.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be in favor of having that meeting. I think Representative Larson would try to set up a private Zoom meeting, and if we didn't, I don't necessarily need to get for an hour or two of meeting, that we might chat over this bill. I also want to give a thank you to Department of Ag for the work that they did.
Yeah. Yes, thank you for everybody who's helped with this morning. So Representative Blackburn, I would have to run that by some attorneys because I'm not sure we could have a private Zoom meeting. I guess it would be a caucus of the Ag Committee. Maybe we could call that. But
yeah.
I've never done that before, so I'm just not sure we can do it. But I know we can informally discuss what's going on, go back and forth to the Department of Ag. Each of you can do that and be involved on your own.
Well, I forgot all about transparency, didn't I?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, that's why they pay me the big bucks. Okay. Committee, any more discussion?